Thanks for joining me on episode 334 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Winston Clements, motivational speaker and limitation breaker. I challenge you to invest yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to recognize your limitations are an illusion and develop resilience is key. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship podcast with my friend, Scott Mader.
Then we can begin to have an impact beyond what we believe we can because we reprogram and create new beliefs. But that's hard. It takes work. It takes challenge. It takes the help of a coach, an accountability partner, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a pastor, a friend.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about impacting the world through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about what norms are, how we often have norms without actually thinking about them, and why you should question your norms to be able to make an impact.
You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast.
We all have these unwritten scripts that play out in our heads, that play out in our actions. You know, we talk about having habits and having routines or having ritual, having things that we do without even really thinking about it. We sort of program ourselves with these norms of behavior as we grow up, as we get older. They become so deeply ingrained in our psyche and our mind and our beliefs that we don't even really realize they're there. We do something and immediately our mind conjures up a conversation or a voice from the past that tells us something about who we are and what we believe and what we do. And if we're doing something that sounds counter to that or seems to be counter to that, then immediately we just don't feel comfortable. We feel out of place. We feel out of sorts. We don't want to do it. We're not behaving in the way that is consistent with what we believe that we are. And the truth is that changing those sorts of core beliefs of who and what you are very, very difficult. It's hard to challenge your norms. If you believe that you don't deserve certain rewards, if you don't deserve certain benefits, if you don't deserve certain success, then you will unconsciously sabotage your own success and begin to bring it down when you begin to move forward and have success. It's a bizarre human trait that we can actually sabotage ourselves through beliefs that we're not even aware that we have, through norms of our activity, norms of our behavior, norms of our beliefs, and our core system of thinking about who and what we are in the world. We think about these things without actually consciously thinking about them. And that's really both the power of norms and how they can work for us, because they're sort of a shorthand. They're They're a way of cutting through the noise and making decisions about what you should do and who you are without really thinking about it. And our brain likes that. We like taking shortcuts because it saves us energy, it saves us thinking. We just do this thing because that's who we are. We do it because we've always done it that way. And I guarantee you that if you began listing your beliefs, your core knowledge, your habits, your routines, your rituals, those things that you do without even thinking, that list would go on for hundreds of items. Not just one or two, but hundreds. We have core norms that we do and we believe and we act on without thinking. We all do. It's like muscle memory, but writ deep in the core being of who and what we are. The truth is, the problem with them isn't that they're not good for us. Sometimes they are. The problem is that we don't actually consciously choose these norms. They often come about to us unconsciously through our upbringing, through our history, through things that have happened to us, often things that we don't even necessarily consciously think about every day. And it creates in us this belief and this mindset and this set of actions that play out as a script that we don't even think about. That's the real power of norms. They give you a direction in your life, and that direction could be fantastic. It could be good for you. You could have all these scripts that play out that take you to really positive places. But what I've seen all too often is, yes, you have some positive routines, you have some positive scripts, you have some things that play out in a great way in your life. But you also have dozens and dozens that actually hold you back. They cause you to maybe gain weight. They cause you to spend more money than you want to. They cause you to not believe in yourself. They cause you to self-sabotage yourself when you begin to have success. They cause you to have a script that plays out that tells you that you're always a victim and it's always your fault, that you are a failure, not that you failed, but that you are a failure. And those things simply aren't true. And when you have those unconscious norms that you're not even aware of, you're not even examining, you're not even thinking about, then they begin to sabotage your life and bring you down. They keep you from living out your calling. They keep you from making an impact. They keep you from being who and what you're supposed to be. And the real truth is, to begin to dissect those, to begin to break those down, you have to question them. You have to challenge them. You have to think to yourself, is this belief I have, is it real? Is it an actual true fact? Or is it just something that I believe? You know, we live in a cause and effect world. If you do certain things, you get certain results. That is cause and effect. But there's a difference between something being your fault and something being your responsibility. You know, if you've got these unconscious scripts that play out and you sabotage your own success, that's really not your fault, but it is your responsibility. It is something that you have to take a hold of and you have to begin to change. You know, Will Smith has a great video on the difference between fault and responsibility. If you haven't seen it, YouTube it, look it up. I'll try to remember to put a link in the show notes to it as well over at this episode's show notes. But that idea of fault and responsibility is powerful. That's a norm. That's a truth. But most of us don't think of it that way. Instead, we tend to blame ourselves. We tend to think to ourselves, it's our fault. It's our fault. I'm a failure. Not, I simply failed this time. And there's a subtle difference between those two thoughts, but there's dramatic difference in how they play out in your life. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. I do this wrong all the time. I beat myself up. I suffer from clinical depression. Trust me, I can spiral into a really, really dark place. And yet the truth is that when I really examine who I am and what God has made me to be, I realize that that dark place isn't who I am. It's a disease, it's a sickness, it's something that happens to me. It's something that I can do things about and I can help prevent it, through therapy, through medication, through talking to people that I care about, through surrounding myself with positivity and energy and goodness and light. All of those things help. So I can take responsibility for my mental health without it being my fault that sometimes it goes wrong. Think about the norms you have. You have norms around money. You have norms around your talent. You have norms around how you look at other people. Unpacking that's how you can make an impact. Because the truth is, sometimes what we think about the world simply isn't true. And if we would unpack that, if we would dissect that, if we would understand that, then we can begin to have an impact beyond what we believe we can, because we reprogram and create new beliefs. But that's hard. It takes work. It takes challenge. It takes the help of a coach, an accountability partner, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a pastor, a friend. It takes surrounding yourself by all of those people to make those changes. So the first step in your homework after this episode, the assignment for you, is to begin to list those norms. Take a piece of paper, and down the left-hand side of the piece of paper, list your habits, list your beliefs, list the norms and the things that are in your head that you don't even think about consciously. Begin to get them out of your head and onto paper. And what you'll find as you begin to make that list, it'll grow longer and longer and longer. But here's the next step. On the right-hand side of that paper, look at each of those beliefs and think to yourself, is this a positive one? Is this one I want to keep? Is this one that's true? Or is this one that debilitates me, that holds me back, one that I need to examine and break? And if it's one of those, if it's a bad one, write down on the right-hand side of the paper the new belief that you're trying to program into yourself. Write down from the limiting belief, turn it into an enabling truth. From the bad habit, write out the intention that you have of beginning to do the new habit. Now, there's a lot more work that has to happen after that to actually break those habits. That's something that I go into with my coaching and my courses. But for now, get them out of your head and onto paper. That's the first step. We'll talk in another episode about what to do next. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.